So I am on a phone as opposed to a larger speaker, so I can walk around with the phone as we look at various things. And what Nicole and I talked about yesterday is that we're going to do a little farm tour, and I'll switch so that you're not looking at me, you're looking outside of me. So we'll do that now because it's sort of important to my practice. I'm going from house outside, and it's going to get loud probably because the sheep will realize I've just come out. Yeah, there they are. There. Okay, so I'm walking. I'm sorry if it's a little bit bumpy ride, but okay, so here's the barn, and here's some of my sheep. Somehow or other it's reversed the image. I don't quite know why, but anyway. We had 12 lambs, 6 sets of twins in the course of a week, right as lockdown was starting. So that's been exciting. And these sheep are, you can see some of them. Here's some of the lambs. So these sheep are blue-faced Leicester Gotland cross, and they are fleece sheep for the most part, although don't tell them, but we do eat some of them. And the fleeces that they make, we actually have them shorn twice a year, and so that their fleeces are that long. So here's some babies just out, some lambs out doing their thing. And so the shearer is coming, I believe it's the 9th of May. And we'll have new fleeces again to manage, probably, I don't know, 30 pounds or so of fleece. And then the garden here, of course, there's some vegetables, but this bed here will be all flowers. And actually, I'm hoping to have the whole bed planted in woad. Woad is a blue dye plant. And then up here, you can't really see it, but this bed is chock-a-block full of madder, which is red. So woad is blue, madder is red. The woad, we're going to walk towards my studio now, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the plants when we're standing still and all of that. Bye, sheep. So I've been using plants as dyes for a number of years, including I used to grow like whole beds of black tulips, Queen of the Night tulips. And here we are in my studio. So I'm going to turn this around now. You'll get me again. Okay, here's me. So the Queen of the Night tulips made a beautiful blue-black, and then the residue, the liquor from the dye, made greens, really vivid greens. And I don't have any samples to show you right now, but wanting to make more blue, I planted woad. And then last year, I thought, if I've got all this dye and I wanted to make my own ink, could I make pigment? So I did. I made pigment. And from about a third of a bed, this is the amount of pigment that I precipitated. And I haven't yet mixed it up into a printing ink, but it's, you know, it's there on the list of things to do. So I'm trying to think where you can see. I'm going to turn this around again. So, you know, work is stored, some prints in process. Work is stored up here. This is a large boat. It showed a couple years ago. It's made of felt. It showed at Arts Walk a couple years ago. These are some quilt bats. that went into a lot of the quilts that I showed in fall for Arts Walk, and also the ones that are on the TCTV Arts Walk replacement. And then all these felt balls were part of an installation project that then morphed into something else. I like to use things from scratch. I also like to work with what I have. Sometimes, like I had this installation project that had about 900 felt balls, and when it was all said and done, the medium that I had was felt balls. So I worked up a bunch of different pieces to work with the felt balls. And yeah, so using the same method, one of the things I'm working on right now is a puppet show. So these are my COVID-19s, and in my mind's eye, they are like, hey, we're the COVID-19, there's only 10 of us, but we're really the COVID-19, like there should be 19 of us. The puppet show will also include some wild things. I've been making some puppets. So this is one of those puppets, one of the wild things, and he's going to be the host of the puppet show. And I think there's going to be some, probably some rabbits in the puppet show. And then these sort of stitched coyotes, which are part of a whole series of projects. So these coyotes, there's 6 models, and you can see on the print that's 3 of them, but there's also prints that show their opposites. So there we go. So this is the print that shows their opposites. In other words, they're flips, because the fabric coyotes are actually printed on both sides and stitched. Like this one, it's this pink on the one side and it's blue on the other side. So the coyotes started as this kind of ball of creatures, because I hear them all the time at night, mostly at night. They raise their babies down in the little creek draw here, and you know, you hear just this, you know, they're just doing their whole thing. And I think of them as like the wild ride. And I think that they're like a ball of things rolling. And finally, I just decided I wanted to make that ball. I wanted to make it into something. So I started with making the fabric ones, and I have now got a pile of fabric coyotes. There they are, kind of. And they are going to get mounted onto some bicycle wheels, I think. This is a work in progress. So bicycle wheels, I think they're going to also get mounted onto or printed onto silk to make a magic lantern. I'm not exactly sure where all of the work is going to go, but I did also want to include those works on paper because, you know, sort of the classic printmaking works on paper, same image, because I'm working with the image and the idea. And I was thinking this morning before coming onto here, how does this connect to my previous body of work? So you may be thinking that. If you're not, anyway, I'm going to answer the question myself. I think that all of my work deals with borders, boundaries, and edges. And I say that because the last body that I showed in the fall had to do really with the border walls and immigrants and immigration. I am a first-generation American. My mother's from Europe. And she would have said in this time about being American during our pandemic, she would have said, well, luckily you're not American. She would have said that to me. And anyway, so I'm raised with that sense of still carrying an immigrant's legacy. So my work dealing with borders and boundaries and edges, it's the line where one thing becomes another. Land becomes the sea. The wild becomes the domesticated. The wild has an incursion on the domestic life. Awake becomes asleep. The known and the unknown, there's a line. So with all of these things, and urban becomes rural. That's another really interesting border and boundary that I have looked at a lot. Sick becomes healthy, healthy becomes sick. Just where borders and boundaries and lines are in any number of things that maybe we posit as opposites, or maybe we think of them as divided. And I think they're not. I think that the connections are huge and myriad. So anyway, this intrigue with coyote is part and parcel with all of that. And I'm just working on depicting my neighbors and playing with my neighbors, the mythic ones, the real ones, the playful ones, the ones that defy death, the ones that lead other people into terrible situations. You know, we have coyotes that people who transport people called coyotes. So there's a whole range of how we ascribe this character. Anyway, so let's see, what else can I tell you about studio and work? I'm gonna turn this around again. So you see, yeah, so work table. Right before we locked down, I was able to secure some flat files, which is awesome and amazing. You know, I have a sewing machine and an ironing board and shelves full of stuff, and I'm very lucky to have a press that I bought years ago. So there's also going to be some coyotes that go through these various hoops. This is a hoop of birds, but there are a range of hoops that the coyotes jump through. Delightful, benevolent, and nefarious and destructive, all of the above. Lots of fabrics, lots of, you know, this is just the supplies, right? More fabrics. I've been making a bunch of masks just like everybody else. And then fleeces. I just finished, they're dry now. So I just finished washing last fall's fleeces, and here they are. Yeah, so it's kind of a never-ending cycle, because in 10 days I will have all new fleeces again to have to manage and wash one at a time, and there we go. So sewing machine, you know, work with all of that. A fabulous sink, you know, all of that's important. So I think I'll just turn it back to you, and maybe at this point somebody, oops, there we go. Somebody has some questions, and I can riff off of what more you want to know.
Where do you do the dyeing? Do you use that ink in your studio there, or do you do it outside?
Most of the time I'm working outside because I have a camp stove, and so camp stove on a table is perfect. And one of the methods I use for dyeing, I'm going to turn this around and show you, Becky, is this is my tool. So these are 4 to 6 inch plumbing pipes, and then they have a cap. So one of the things I've done is I have laid out dye materials. Some people call it plant printing, but I lay out plant materials and I roll up fabric, silk, sometimes cotton, but more often protein fibers. And I tie them up shibori style and then put them in these pipes and pour boiling water over it. So what that does is it not only activates the plant material to dye the fabric that's in there, but it creates this liquor. So that then becomes the dye liquor for something else. But yeah, I do work outside. I have a sort of a patio. I don't do a lot of dyeing in the winter because it's hot and I'd rather be outside. So long and short.
Yeah, I was wanting to know about the washing of the wool. Where do you do that?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to walk over here and show you the gizmo. Okay.
You said you did one at a time.
I do. And I have this great big sink.
Yeah.
So among the things that goes in here is, so those rolls on the bottom, they're just pieces of pipe, and they keep a basket rolling around. So the basket gets filled with fleece, and then it can move around the sink. So water on top and underneath it. And I use the hottest possible water I can. I have a good spray thing. It's a nice deep sink. And then when they are drying, they dry on like these sweater dryer thingers. Yeah. But of course, the fleece that goes in has been really well picked. All the little poop things and all the, naughty, useless parts have been pulled away. So I've skirted really well. Yeah. Does that answer? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've chosen a labor-intensive endeavor here.
Well, as it turns out, I really like things that come from scratch.
That's wonderful.
It's just how it is. So yeah,
Right.
this is a single fleece here.
Okay.
And it still has some veg matter. So really I'm a farm and we have farm production. So I have farm products like, I have yarn, and some of you may know we have socks that, the farm gets made and sells, and it's very, very practical. I just as soon always sell the socks, but sometimes I like having some yarn myself to work with.
Yeah.
I haven't quite decided if this batch plus the one that's coming, plus all of this that got washed and carted into roving is going to go for yarn. I think it might, or into the next batch of socks, which will be, if I sent it away right after May, right after Mary Claire Geyer shears, I will get socks back probably for Christmas 2021.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where are they made?
I vote for socks because I need my yearly pair.
Yeah, I've got plenty of socks to sell this coming Christmas. We had a brand new batch this year, and we sold about half of them. So the socks get made. I send the fleeces to Zeilinger's Wool Mill, which is in Michigan, and they are one of the only mills in the country. There's another one in Vermont. One of the only mills in the country that will take a small farmer's clip. I don't have a ton. I have 150 pounds. I don't have 1,000 pounds. So they'll take 150 pounds and manage it into a sock yarn. To get a sock yarn is, you look at your socks, it's a really, really, really fine yarn, and it takes a very specific, apparently very expensive machine to take yarn that very last step into a sock yarn. So Zeilinger's Wool Mill does that, and then they ship to Northland Woolen Mills in Minnesota, and Northland Woolen Mills in Minnesota makes the socks and sends them back.
Oh, marvelous,
Yeah, and then,
marvelous.
you know, we label and all of that. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm bowled over, by the way, with how much energy you have and how all embracing your art practice and your sock production and your sheep rearing. And you seem to deal with a lot of fundamentals, as you say, and you like to start from scratch, and everything comes from this very kind of basic, kind of almost survival source. And I was wondering, how much is the materials important to your art practice? Because we've actually seen very little of, I know your work and I love it, but we've actually seen very little of your work. And I was wondering, how much does this whole machine that you've got going here influence the materials that you work, and how important to your, maybe the message in your work are the materials that you use? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm happy to pull out more work. I think that the work in progress, you know, there's that, and a lot of things have in recent years tended to be really large pieces. Like there's a lot of components that go into a piece, like the hundreds of balls and the boat, which you know, it was yardage after yardage after yardage. This is all felt yardage that will become something else. So it's making of that material. I used to thematically think of the work as being tied, the message, the material being part of the message. It's like that still, but I don't feel quite as married to it because I've been doing this for, golly, a dozen years. So to have the message be, I feel like it's intrinsic. So if I am working with images of the wild, you know, I have fences to keep the coyotes from eating my lambs. So I have to make friends with the coyotes. So they come into my work and I find them pretty fascinating. I'm not sure I'm answering your question quite. I had a series a while ago that included 30 buckets, 30 felt buckets. That was a piece that showed in a couple of different places across the country. And they showed as a stack. And part of that came from the idea that I carry buckets of water every day. So 30 buckets, 30 days. The stack was probably about 8 feet high when they sat inside each other, and you could sort of distinctly see them. Maybe it was only 6 feet high. So, yeah, the work does come from my relationship to these other practices. The felt boat, so it's a sheep's head. Let's see, there you go. It's a sheep's head. Anyway, so the origin of this boat was that in 2015, our sheep were murdered, pretty much the entire flock. We lost 8 bred ewes and a guardian llama to pit bulls. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to take up some other art form or music. I'm never making art again. because it was horribly devastating. It was an overnight happening. So overnight, we lost 8 bred ewes, a guardian llama. We were left with one who pretended she was dead, and 2 that needed lots and lots of vet care, one of which has ended up to be an amputee. I was sure I was never, ever going to make felt again. I was never going to work in textiles again. It just wasn't going to happen. And somehow or other, over the course, that was like October, and over the course of that winter, I heard a song, and the song was something about the water's wide, I can't cross over it, but give me a boat and I'll find a way. So I thought, yeah, oh yeah, I can make a boat. And so the boat became my vehicle through grief. It became how I could re-engage and how I could find my way back to the material that I'm really, really comfortable with. The following fall, I think it was, the following fall, I had this installation that called for the felt balls. So I've been working a lot with issues having to do with place and identity and immigration and migration. And the installation was a piece I called New Land. It was in Park City, Utah. And I had an entire room to put something into. So there was a basketball court with these 800 felt balls on it and an interpretation platform. For my non-artist life, I've been a librarian I was a librarian for 30 years. So the job that I held most of that time and that I held during that time was librarian for the Nisqually tribe. It always struck me as absolutely amazing that I, who was not from this place, not related to anybody except my children in this place, I have 2 children. I have no cousins anywhere ever on the planet. My mother was from Europe. I am as unconnected as possible. I met one grandparent once. That I would work so closely with people who are of a place and of each other, with each other. So the piece that I made, New Land, really talked about conceptually this idea of how these worlds come together, because the world is full of that and everything in between as people go, and also how it's possible for any one of us to misinterpret each other and misinterpret each other whole hog culturally. So then I had a boat and I had all the balls left, and the world was beginning to recognize the refugee turmoil. So it made total sense to me that my community, which showed up on the basketball court for New Land, then became the residents or the people that needed transport, the community that needed transport in the boat. So the boat has shown since then full of the balls. And then further still, like last summer, I had an installation at one of Amazon's windows. It's a Shunpike project. And that basketball court became the wall backdrop, not a horizontal, but a vertical. And all the balls were sewn constellation-like on there as they flew into or out of, just depending on how you decided to read it, the boat. The people who I talked to about their interpretation of the piece were actually the guards and the bus drivers for Amazon outside the building because they were there all the time. And a couple of the guys were like, oh yeah, they're all headed into the cosmos. They're coming and going from this different ways of going about the universe, which I thought, yes, that's what's happening. So this veers off answering your question about how important the material is, but I haven't bought fleece in probably 10 years. I've been using stuff up. I have bought ink. I do buy paper. I want to figure out if I can make ink. Mostly it demystifies it for me. Yeah, so I don't know. Did I get an answer that worked for you?
So what I'm getting is that you're very much influenced by your environment and how you choose to live.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, thank you. And I want to know where to buy your socks.
Oh, you can buy them online, herculesfarm.com.
Okay, thank you. I'm really impressed with everything you're doing. It's amazing. Thank you.
I'll tell you that I've been, I had a farm stand. Anybody who saw me, my daughter helps me sell at Duck the Mall, selling socks. We have kind of refangled that farm stand to be a puppet show booth. And hopefully, as the world opens up here and we can have puppet shows in each other's yards, she lives up on the east side, I'm going to have this puppet show with my little band of COVIDs, and I'll show you my bad guy. Here's my bad guy. Wait, let's see. Oh. Okay. But it's a little like Punch and Judy, so I think my wild thing will bat him down and it'll be just fine.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
Do you ever block print on your felt or on any of the forms that you make?
So this printing on fabrics has been, and then quilting it up and then running them through the washing machine so they get all kind of wrinkly like that. That's all printed on fabrics. And I've been working with that. I've printed on a lot of silks and, commercially sold some scarves and the like. These are all, the lines on here are all embroideries, like the eyeballs and stuff, that's embroidery. And I'm thinking about how to use the blocks. It takes a long time to carve, so I use them for various things. They just become elements. So I'm thinking to print on some veneer and see where that takes me. Felt is really hard to print on. So it hasn't, I've tried, but I haven't liked what it does. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any last questions for Faith? We're getting to around that time.
Okay.
Faith,
Yes.
do your sheep have names?
Oh, yeah. Well, we look at the 12 lambs. We had 6 boys and 6 girls, and 3 of those boys are kind of named Meat. I have to tell you. But the rest of them, yeah, they all have names. So this year's theme was candy. So we have Wrigley and Reese and Skittles and Ike and Mike and Caramel. And yeah. And then the moms are Gwen and Crumpet and Mrs. Robinson and Maxine and Winnie. I think that's it. I don't think I forgot anybody. But yeah, and then there's Ram. There's a Ram, and he has companionship of 2 castrated males. They're called Weathers. So the Ram is named Rainer, and the the two other guys that he lives with. One is Edison, and the other is Leonardo. So, yeah.
Cool.
Faith, you are marvelous. Thank you.
You're very kind. You're
Such an
very kind.
inspiration. Oh my goodness.
Well, you know, busy hands are happy hands, as my family likes to say. So, thank you.
Well,
I have to say I'm not wearing them right now, but I have gotten a pair of the Hercules socks every year since I moved here in 2015, and the ones I got in 2015 are still going strong. So
Thank you.
recommend.
Nora and I were talking about, it'll show up on the website. So Nicole, if your 2015 ones are wearing out, we're going to give you a $5. We're going to say anybody who wants to get a new pair and they want to bring their old pair, we'll either help you figure out darning them, or we'll give you $5 credit on a new pair. Yeah.
Great.
So, yeah.
That was delightful. I loved seeing the sheep so much, and I got to see them yesterday also. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions for Faith? We have a round of applause. Thank you so much, Faith. That was
Well,
amazing.
you know, my hands are raised to all of you fellow artists. I'm so grateful to be in a community of other artists, and thank you for being interested. I really appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you. And just real quick, there were several comments just saying it was great to learn about your process, such a treat to see your farm, and can't wait to watch the video. Someone had to leave early.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Well, we'll see you.
So not as an advertisement per se, but somebody said they didn't see much work. So their not TCTV, Thurston County Media, TC Media, Deborah Vinsel put together like Arts Watch, and I sent her a PowerPoint of a show of a body of work called Upon Discovery, and she sent me an email that had like 6 or 7 times that you could watch it. So it's out there, and apparently it's going to show for the next 10 days or so at various different times. I'm sure you can look it up, or you can contact me, you know, after this, and I will forward that email to you or put you in touch with them.
Also, I think if you search for Faith Hagenhofer on YouTube, there are a few different videos that come up from different residencies. So
yeah,
I definitely was very focused on the sheep, but if you haven't seen Faith's amazing work before, printmaking and fiber and everything in between, definitely look her up. And when I put the YouTube video up, I'll put links to your website, and
thank you.
I can add those too.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and also, y'all, you should all feel happy to advertise yourselves when you're doing these. So.
Yes, let us know when the puppet show is.
Oh yeah, well, I will for sure let Nicole know, and then
Good.
you know, I'll put it on my website, on the Hercules Farm website.
Good, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Nicole.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.